everybody. Welcome to our show today. We're going to talk about prehistoric mammal adaptations, live from the Museum of the Rockies. I am so excited to be hanging out with you, with Amy Atwater, and to be talking about mammals. I'm Jamie. I'm the Outreach Program Manager here, and a mammal, and your host for today. I'd like to introduce you to the star of today's show, Miss Amy Atwater.
Hello.
Come on up. Amy is our Paleontology Collections Manager, which means she's kind of like a fossil librarian. In just a few minutes, Amy will introduce us to several prehistoric mammals that were roaming around Montana thousands to millions of years ago, and show us also some of the cool adaptations they used to survive. Like I said before, our friends and partners at Streamable Learning are also on hand today to assist with any IT needs. If you're having any issues, go ahead and type those into the chat box and they'll be sure to jump in and help you. Feel free to use that chat box at any point throughout our program today. Questions are always welcomed, and we might even throw some questions back at you. If we are not able to respond to your questions immediately, we'll definitely have time at the end to answer as many of those as we can. So thanks for posting, and we'll answer as many questions as we have time for. Before Amy begins, we're going to spend just a few minutes taking a closer look at where we are today in Bozeman, Montana at the Museum of the Rockies. So I'm going to be jumping on and off the screen a little bit. You'll hear me but not see me, but you'll always have someone or something cool to look at. All right, there we are in Bozeman, Montana. We're going to zoom in just a little bit. There we are, about 80 miles north of Yellowstone National Park and 315 miles from our friends up there in Canada. Hello, friends from Canada. Thanks for joining us. We are nestled in the beautiful and historic Gallatin Valley, right next to Montana State University. For those of you who've been here before, this might be very familiar. Can you tell us what kind of dinosaur is greeting you as you walk in? Any guesses? Let's start typing some things into that chat box. That is Big Mike. If you guessed a T-Rex, you are absolutely correct. Go ahead and let us, as we venture into our exhibits, we're going to be greeted by some dinosaurs. There's our friend Big Mike again, chomping at the Bridger Mountains. Parade of dinosaurs leading into the Siebel Dinosaur Complex. And once we get in there, we have an Allosaurus, a Brontosaurus, and a Plesiosaur guarding the Glass Menagerie, which is where that picture is taken from. Glass Menagerie is a really special part of our museum in that it holds all of our mammal fossils. I'm going to turn it over to Amy right now to tell you more about these awesome fossils and prehistoric mammal adaptations. I'll talk to you more in a little bit.
All right, thank you, Jamie, for that introduction, and welcome everyone to the Paleontology Collections here at Museum of the Rockies. We are now underneath in the basement of all those exhibits you just saw and heard about at our museum, where all of our fossils are stored if they're not upstairs on display. So before we jump into what types of fossils we have here and all the cool adaptations about prehistoric mammals, we also want to define some features first, such as what is a fossil? So I'm sure some folks out there have an idea of what a fossil is. Go ahead and let us know if you have some definitions that you like to use for what a fossil is, and hear about what defines these ancient prehistoric organisms that we find and store here in our collections.
Tell us what is a fossil, maybe some fossils you have found.
Ooh.
While you're exploring.
Yeah, here in Montana, you can find all sorts of cool fossils all over North America and the world for that matter.
Dinosaur bones, animal bones.
Yep, dinosaur bones, those are fossils, indeed, all sorts of animal bones. And one of the defining features of what a fossil is that it has to be older than 10,000 years old. So if it's millions of years old, that's going to be a fossil. And if it's 10,000 years old, it's a fossil. But if it's only a couple hundred years old, then we don't consider that to be a fossil. So a fossil we define here at the museum as being any trace or record, so maybe a bone or a footprint of any prehistoric organism that is recorded in rock or is at least 10,000 years old. So if you like paleontology and like fossils, then you should know a lot about modern animals and geology as well. And what we do here at the museum, and my job as collections manager, is to take care of all of our fossils in our collection here. But fossils don't just magically appear here in collections. They have to be collected from the field and dug up from the ground first. So paleontologists go into the field and they will excavate a fossil, dig it up out of the ground, dig all around it, and then they might wrap, and usually wrap, a big plaster jacket made of plaster and burlap around the rock containing that fossil to keep it safe and protected as it journeys from outside to the museum to be studied and prepared. It's kind of like having a cast on your arm or your leg that protects bones. Both of these are going to be protecting bones within the cast. Once it comes to the museum, something like this, a jacket like this, will go to our paleontology laboratory, where fossil preparators will open it up and remove all of the excess rock surrounding that bone and clean it up so it's just the bone. Then the fossils make their way here to our paleontology collections. And like you heard Jamie say, you can think of collections as a fossil library. All types of fossils, from plants to insects to mammals to dinosaurs and fish and beyond, are stored in this room. And for example, we've got one here. This is a fossil that is from a dinosaur. Museum of the Rockies is well known for our vast fossil collection of dinosaur bones. This is the lower jaw of a hadrosaur dinosaur, which are also called duck-billed dinosaurs. So those are big dinosaurs that would have been eating vegetables and vegetation and would have been herbivores, and we'll talk more about that. This is the lower jaw of one of those dinosaurs, so this part of that dinosaur, and what you see here, this feature, the shiny brown features here, are actually all of the teeth of this dinosaur. They grow in this overlapping pattern in duck-billed dinosaurs in something we call a dental battery. And what's really, really cool about dinosaurs and reptiles and other animals like sharks is that they can constantly, and dinosaurs could constantly, replace their teeth throughout their life. So as you see on this part, this is where the dinosaur would have actually been chewing its food, and the food it was eating was wearing away at the teeth. So dinosaurs were able to be constantly growing teeth to replace those worn parts so they can keep eating their food. Now, mammals, like all of us, are different in that we only have 2 sets of teeth throughout our entire lives. We cannot constantly replace our teeth, unfortunately, which means it is really important to be taking care of your teeth and going to the dentist and making sure you're brushing and flossing. Dinosaurs didn't have to worry about those sorts of things. They could just replace their teeth. What's great about teeth here at our museum and throughout the world is that teeth can tell you a lot about a mammal and its life, how it survives, and what it eats. We can see this in modern animals today. And before we talk about all of our prehistoric critters, I want to define some features that we see in modern mammals and the diets of modern mammals, which is reflected in their teeth. So we're going to start out with this. This is a modern animal jaw. So this came from an animal that is still alive today. Do we have any guesses of what kind of bone this is or what kind of animal this bone may have come from?
Let Amy know in your chat box what kind of animal you guess. What kind of animal jaw.
You might see it while you're hiking around the woods. My dog really loves to sniff out all sorts of these bones from these types of animals.
We have cow, dog,
horse,
deer,
elk,
reindeer.
Oh, awesome. That's excellent. Oh, good job.
Lion. Holy moly.
We're going to touch on a lot of those animals today, so hold on to those ideas. But if you said deer, you're correct. This is the lower jaw, so from right here in the deer of a deer alive today. And deer, are they out there eating hamburgers and meat and all of those sorts of things? Or what do deer eat for the most part in their day-to-day lives? Do you think that they're going to Pizza Hut and ordering a pizza, or are they maybe browsing around your yard?
You've got answers coming in: plants, grass, berries.
Yes, all of these are correct. Deer are what we call herbivores. So that's a phrase I want you to remember for today, because we're going to talk about herbivores a lot. Herbivores are animals like deer that only eat plant matter. So maybe that's grass or leaves or berries or fruit or twigs or even cactus for some herbivores. But in the case of the deer, they're mostly eating leafy green materials from bushes and trees and grazing on grasses and browsing on woody green and brown material too. So great, we've got a deer that represents our herbivore. Now, the opposite of a deer and of an herbivore is going to be something like this animal. Any idea about what animal is represented by this beautiful skull? I see some sharp teeth. Oh, it's pretty small.
A rat, a fox, a bobcat.
Ooh, good job. So
Badger.
folks saying bobcat are completely right. This is a bobcat skull. And you can see that reflected in these really, really sharp canines, kind of the fangs here. And also, every tooth is very blade-like. And that is for being a carnivore and eating a diet based only on meat, whether that's hunting other animals or scavenging animals that have already died. Carnivores are those animals that are having a diet that consists only of meat. And bobcats and all cats are a great representation of carnivores. So our last one that we're going to talk about, we've talked about herbivores and carnivores, which are important words. We also have a set of teeth here. This is a little interesting. These are actually a copy of my teeth from my dentist. Because when you're a paleontologist, you ask your dentist for copies of your own teeth. And we humans are eating both plants and animals. And our teeth can reflect that. We have sharp front teeth for slicing through stuff, but we also have big, broad back molars that are good for dealing with crunchier vegetation matter and berries and all sorts of delicious foods. But we are omnivores. So omnivores are animals that eat both plants and animals. Now, humans have a choice in if they're going to be omnivores or not, but our teeth reflect that we are able to eat all sorts of different foods, and that can be helpful to survive. So we've talked about some of our basics on different types of teeth that we see in modern mammals, and we can use what we know about modern mammals to reconstruct our information on fossil mammals. So paleontologists look at mammals alive today to compare and understand mammals in the fossil record. We also use teeth heavily to do this because, like we've already talked about, it tells a lot about what a mammal eats and how it lives and how it's related to other mammals. The other reason we use teeth a lot in the fossil record is because teeth are the hardest part of the skeleton. And that means that they're the most likely to be preserved in rock over millions of years. And that's kind of crazy to think about, that our teeth are actually harder and stronger than even our biggest bones in our bodies. And it is this aspect that makes them great tools for understanding mammals in the fossil record. And the earliest record of fossil mammals comes from their teeth. And mammals even lived at the time of the dinosaurs. We got a really little itty bitty mammal here. So even during the time of the dinosaurs, millions and millions and millions of years ago, we had mammals, and we know about them because of the teeth they left behind. So this specimen right here is a tiny, tiny mammal jaw. So you can see it's it could fit all on my finger. This is the entire lower jaw of one teeny tiny Cretaceous mammal called Alphodon that we store here at the museum. Alphodon, this itty bitty fossil, is closely related to modern day marsupials. Now, does anybody know what kinds of animals are marsupials and maybe where in the world today we find marsupials? Any guesses out there about marsupials, which is kind of a big crazy word, but I bet some of you out there have heard of marsupials before, and let us know other animals besides Alphodon here who is a marsupial.
Possums, koalas, kangaroo, mouse bat, Tasmanian devil. They all have pouches.
Yes, they all have pouches. Wombats, Tasmanian devils, kangaroos, and most of these marsupials today we find in Australia. Earlier in our fossil record, we had marsupial fossils throughout the world, and today we still do have marsupials living in North America. And Alphodon has a pretty good example of a modern equivalent is that of the opossum, which I heard some opossum guesses as well, and that is 100% correct. So this is a juvenile opossum that would have been a pretty close comparison to what Alphodon would have looked like and probably would have functioned like. So possums are marsupials that live in North America. They have no hair on their tails. They can actually hang from trees by their tails, which is pretty cool. And they're a good representation of what some of our earliest mammals at the time of the dinosaurs would have looked like, maybe like this little opossum here. Alphodon would have been very similar to this would have been an early marsupial. So even though it is called the age of the dinosaurs, mammals are still there during that time.
Amy, you showed us maybe the smallest fossil we have in our collection. Do you know what the largest fossil in our collection, and what animal does it come from?
The largest fossil we have in our collection is going to be from a dinosaur, and that is going to be the upper leg bone, so the femur of a long-necked dinosaur, a sauropod called a Apatosaurus. We have one of their femurs, one of their femora in our collections that's taller than I am and really, really heavy, and I'm about 5'10", so it is a really, really big fossil. Another close one for biggest fossil in our collection is going to be the tusks of a mammoth. And we'll talk more about those too in a little while, but those are some of our younger fossils from the ice ages, just 10,000 years ago, from these big elephants that used to live in North America when it was much, much cooler. So great question, and we'll get back to some of those animals in a little bit too. So we've talked a little bit about some of the mammals that lived at the same time as the dinosaurs, but then at around 66 million years ago, dinosaurs go extinct, which marks the beginning of the age of mammals. Many of the mammals from this time period, which includes today, have living relatives that we have today. However, they don't look exactly the way they look today in our fossil record. They look very, very different, and I'm going to go through some examples of modern animals with fossil relatives. So the first thing we're going to talk about are horses.
Do any of you have horses at your house?
Yeah, any horse people out there? They're pretty cool. They're pretty big and beautiful and majestic. This is a skull of a modern horse. You can see compared to that teeny tiny mammal that we were looking at from the Cretaceous, that it's a much, much bigger animal. It is got lots and lots of teeth. You can see here that the teeth are very big and also really tall. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of tooth sticking out from under the jaw for this horse to use to chew with things. And also, if you look at the pattern on the chewing surface of those teeth, it's really complicated with all sorts of squiggly lines in there. So this size and this complex pattern is all part of a horse's way to survive by eating lots and lots of grass. So I bet you guys have seen horses grazing on grass or hay, and horses are going to haven't always been grazers eating grass, but grass as a food source is really gritty. Grass is really tough for the teeth. It's actually got little teeny tiny pieces of sand in grass that wear down your teeth really, really quickly if you're only eating grass, which for us, I do not recommend that. So horses have adapted and evolved by getting these really tall, big teeth with complicated chewing surfaces to help withstand that really tough, gritty diet that they've been eating. Now, these are, this is a modern horse, as I said, so now let's look at some fossil horse material, because horses haven't always looked like that. This is a specimen of a fossil horse. These are some of the teeth again, and this is about 15 million years old. This fossil came from just north of Yellowstone National Park in Paradise Valley, and these teeth, as you can see, they're pretty big, but when we compare them to a modern horse tooth, they're not nearly as big, and then if we look at them on the side, they're also not nearly as tall. Even with this extra rock here, they're still not as tall as the modern horse tooth, which is, this one is the modern horse tooth, and here's our fossil horse tooth. And you can see that the fossil horse had much shorter teeth than the modern horse, and much smaller teeth than the modern horse. So horses haven't always been eating just grasses. They have evolved as grasslands have spread across North America in the past 30 million years to be able to withstand a grass-heavy diet by evolving from a smaller, shorter tooth to a much bigger, taller tooth. We can also see some of this reflected in not only the teeth of a horse, but also the limbs of a horse. So this right here is a modern horse. This is the foot or toe of one of those modern horses. And I'm sure folks know, if you've ever put on a horseshoe or dealt with horses, that horses are walking around on just one toe and one hoof here. Early horses actually had 5 toes and no hooves. They actually had padded toes like what you would see on a dog. And we have an example to compare this one to from the fossil record. Our one-toed modern horse can be compared to, again, this one is a fossil from another about 15 million year old fossil, and it's got some familiar features. It doesn't have 5 toes. It doesn't represent our earliest fossil, and you can see that it does in fact have a hoof. So by 15 million years ago, horses were walking around on hooves. But if you notice and look closely, there's a bone here that modern horses don't have, and on the other side too, there's a bone right here. So as I said, horses originally had 5 toes. This is a transitionary horse that had 3 toes. So these bones here are the extra 2 toes that we see in fossil horses that modern horses do not have today. And this too is a way to survive in open grasslands. Having one big strong foot and one big strong toe has been an adaptation to run really fast along hard grasslands and escape predators. So horse teeth and horse feet have shown how horses have adapted and survived through millions and millions and millions of years.
We have a question about how you got the horse bones.
Which ones? If you mean the modern horse bones, we have good connections with landowners around the state of Montana who donate this material to us. And we store it here because, as we've talked about today, paleontologists need to compare their fossil specimens to modern specimens. So we have a vast collection of modern animal bones to be able to compare our fossil bones to and be able to say things about the lives and adaptations of these animals. The fossils were excavated and from Paradise Valley and then also brought here to Museum of the Rockies, as we are one of the biggest places in the state to store fossils for the general public and for scientists to come and deal with. Okay, So I think now we're going to talk about another herbivore. So horses eating all of that grass would make them herbivores, and they're grazers grazing on grass. Another type of animal that we had in Montana millions of years ago that a lot of folks don't know about are rhinos. You believe that rhinos used to live in Montana? So this is the lower jaw of a modern rhino. Now, I think folks might know that rhinos today do not live in North America. Today we only find rhinos in Africa and Asia, and they're really, really big. They've got really, really big teeth, but not quite the same complicated chewing surface like the horse. Rhinos are more of browsers. They're also herbivores, so vegetarians, if you will. But instead of eating just grass, they do eat some grass, but they're also eating woody material, leafy green material, berries, fruits, roots, tubers, all sorts of big things to be able to support this really, 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 really big mammal that today we don't have in North America. However, in our fossil record, we do have a lot of rhinos. So, for example, this is a fossil rhino from Montana. This fossil is, as you can see, really big, but still much smaller than that modern rhino we were just looking at. This rhino is about 35 million years old. That's how long ago rhinos were living in North America and in Montana. But we know it is a rhino because of the shape of the skull, and also it's got those rhino teeth. Big, big teeth to be able to deal with that being an herbivore and eating plant material, but not just not just grazing on grasses, but also browsing on woody, leafy material too. Both herbivores, but eating slightly different things. And again, that's why teeth are very, very handy to be able to understand little differences between mammal groups, like rhinos and horses.
Amy, were rhinos first found, or did they first live in North America?
Rhinos, yes, rhinos, some of the earliest rhinos come from both Asia and North America. Off the top of my head, I don't remember if the earliest one is from one or the other, but we have rhinos going back till about 45 million years ago in North America. So rhinos have a long, long, long history and didn't go extinct until about 10 million years ago, after making their way to Africa and other places where we still do find rhinos today.
Would you say that all mammals' teeth have changed over time?
For the most part, all mammals' teeth have changed over time, even if it's very small. However, when we were talking about our little marsupial friend here, our possum teeth have changed very little over time. They figured out a tooth style that worked for them, and they have modified their teeth very little over millions of years. That doesn't mean that these animals aren't still evolving. They are, and if we were to look at the DNA of these critters, it has changed a lot over time. But things like the teeth of possums and of certain marsupials has stayed pretty constant for over 100 million years, which is pretty incredible to think about.
How can you tell that teeth are 100 million years old?
How can you tell that teeth are 100 million years old? They're not going to whisper that to you, unfortunately, which would be really handy. But what we use is clues from the rocks that we find these teeth in to tell us how old they are. And that's why understanding geology and rocks and how rocks are deposited is extremely important for understanding paleontology. So we know a fossil tooth is 150 million years old here because we might find it in a very specific formation that we have figured out is exactly that many million years old based on what types of rocks are there. Also, you can use things like absolute dating to be able to get into the specifics of exactly how old they are by using some of the minerals in the rocks and getting ages from those minerals. So geology is very important for understanding the age of our fossils.
We see all these other great questions coming in too. We're going to save those till a little bit later so we can let Amy tell us about all the cool specimens she has for us today.
I'm so glad folks have questions. This is great. Okay, so today, so far, we have talked about 2 herbivores, right? 2 plant-eating mammals that have long histories here in Montana, like the horses and the rhinos. But I want to know, here's a question for you guys, who do you think was eating the horses and the rhinos at this time? This is millions and millions of years ago. We're talking 35 to 20 or so to 15 million years ago. What type of predators do you think were around at that time eating rhinos and horses?
Why am I not surprised you guys said dinosaurs?
Dinosaurs. Well,
Saber-toothed cats.
saber-toothed cats, okay.
Tigers. T-Rexes. People.
People. Oh, these are all great. These are great hypotheses.
Bears. Lions. Triceratops. Smilodon.
Some imaginative, creative responses here.
That had a question mark at the end, that's why I said it like that.
These are all great, yes, and we're hitting on some of the big top predators through time. So at this point, we're talking about when most dinosaurs have already gone extinct, especially things like the T-Rex. Now, if you mean dinosaurs by birds, then yes, that is still very, very, very correct. Birds have been preying on mammals for forever, and they are top predators, so that's a great creative response. What I'm going to talk about right now, though, is we have a modern comparison that I'll talk about first, and I bet this skull looks comparative or familiar to folks. So this is kind of the predator I was going to talk about from deep time. This is a modern skull from a coyote, which is a type of dog. So dogs have long snouts and lots of teeth. Dogs have sharp teeth at the front of their mouth because they are predators. They are using their teeth to bite through meat. But dogs are also very, very opportunistic, and they also have these big, flat, broad teeth with lots of big, bumpy surfaces in the back of their mouth because they're also dealing with tough material like bone and roots. And coyotes will also eat prickly pear cactus, which sounds very uncomfortable, but they have teeth that will help them eat both meat and tough plants, making them omnivores like us. So dogs can be predators and omnivores. And in the fossil record, maybe preying on those rhinos and horses would have been something like this fossil right here. So this is a 15 million year old dog skull, found right here around Bozeman, Montana. And this specimen is what we call a borophagine, which is a fancy word for bone-crushing dog. That's right. These dogs have been studied so much that we know that they had front sharp teeth for slicing through meat, but they also had big, strong back teeth for crunching through bone, being both predators and scavengers and opportunistic feeders. Something like maybe like a modern hyena could be a comparison to these bone-crushing dogs who were around Montana about 15 million years ago, probably eating all of the horses and rhinos and whatever else they could catch or scavenge upon. So this is a beautiful specimen, 15 million year old dog that was barking around Montana a long, long time ago, long before any humans arrive. So we know that the bone-crushing dogs would have been preying on those horses and rhinos, but there's other animals that they probably would have liked to take a bite out of as well. We have a lot of animals in our collections here, fossil mammals in our collections here, who are closely related to cows and bison and deer, and we're going to talk about some of those. So let me grab this skull. All right, I bet this skull looks familiar to folks. If you want to give us your idea of what type of animal this skull represents and what animal this came from, go ahead and let us know. I bet folks have probably found skulls like this here in Montana. This is an animal that does still live in Montana and really all over North America.
Elk, deer, mule deer, buck, elk, buck, antelope.
Nice, yes.
Caribou.
Caribou, yes. All of those are great, great, great guesses. And if you said deer, you are correct. This is a deer, which are closely related to elk and caribou and moose and of the like. And they are known for having these antlers off the top of their skull that they regrow every year, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. So deer today, we already talked about deer being herbivores and deer eating lots of leafy green material. They're what we would call a browser with an herbivore. They do eat some grass, but it isn't their only diet source. So deer have teeth that aren't nearly as tall and aren't nearly as big as something like the horse for the grass. And they're actually pretty sharp in some ways too. But as you know, deer aren't eating meat. These sharp teeth, and if you ever have found a deer skull, you may have noticed how sharp those teeth are, is for slicing through leafy green material from trees and bushes and shrubs and the like. So they have these sharp teeth for browsing on their diet and being herbivores as well. So we have some relatives of the deer in our fossil record here at MOR, such as one of my favorites, this big heavy skull, this animal right here. This is called an oreodont, which does kind of sound like a cookie, but probably didn't taste as good as an Oreo cookie. Oreodonts lived in North America and Montana from 40 million years ago to about 5 million years ago. They were really big. They're closely related to deer and goats and sheep and pigs and even camels. And while they may look fearsome with these big heavy skulls and big teeth, they too are herbivores. They would have been eating leafy green plant material, and you can see that some of the teeth in this oreodont are a lot like the teeth we just saw in that deer skull. So they too are kind of sharp, and all of those sharp ridges, these broad sharp ridges, are for slicing through vegetation, not through meat. Even though they had some pretty big teeth, they weren't using that to hunt animals. It was more for fighting within their own group. So oreodonts are going to be another browsing herbivore that we have in our fossil record, and could get to really, really large sizes. Like this one right here would have been about the size of a cow living today, which is really, really big for a fossil mammal, not as big as those mammoths that we will get to. And the other relative of the deer and the oreodonts that we have around today are going to be another familiar looking face, hopefully, to a lot of you out there. This skull of this animal right here. Do we have any guesses on what this animal is? Whose skull this is? And
Bison, bull, buffalo.
Yes.
You guys nailed it.
Yes, you guys nailed it. That's perfect. This is a bison, commonly called a buffalo, but its scientific name is bison, which makes things easy. And bison are well known in Yellowstone National Park and across North America. And bison have a very long history in North America and have been in North America for thousands and thousands of years and thrived here during the ice ages. There was actually many, many different types of bison that lived in North America during the ice ages when it was very, very cold, pretty recently in the past 20 to 10,000 years. If we look at the teeth of the bison, they're pretty similar to what we saw with the deer, but they are a lot taller on the side of the jaw, and they are pretty big. So bison are actually grazing. They're herbivores as well, so they're vegetarians, just eating plant matter, but they are eating more grasses like the horse, but they're just more distantly related. So their teeth show similarities in their diet, but also show how they're related to other animals. So that those tall teeth of the bison help us understand that bison have been grazing on grasslands for a very, very, very long time. And bison represent just one of many really big, awesome animals and mammals that lived in Montana during the ice ages. So let's talk about a few others. I'm going to put this guy down. The ice ages are a cool time here, and we were going to talk about the mammoths and mastodons finally, as I said. So here we go. This is a Columbian Mammoth. It's different from a Mastodon by being a little bit bigger and having more curved tusks there. And they're also very different because of their teeth. So let me grab their teeth for you real quick. This is a tooth from a mammoth. It is really big. This is just one tooth, which is pretty crazy. It is relatively flat. This would have been where it chewed its food. So this is looking at it from the side. It's relatively flat with these big grinding surfaces. Mammoths were grazers. They were eating grass. It's kind of like a giant horse tooth, really tall, really big, and a big grinding surface. So mammoths and modern elephants have teeth like this. Mastodons have teeth more like this. So they're not nearly as flat. This is the chewing surface. They're not nearly as flat. They're big and bumpy because they were more browsers, browsing on leafy green material. So the biggest difference between mammoths and mastodons are their teeth and their diets. Okay, the last one I'm going to show you guys. We've talked a little bit about it, but what would have been eating the mammoths and the mastodons during the ice ages? Any guesses on what would have been eating those guys?
What mammal was roaming around the grasslands eating mammoths and mastodons? Oh my goodness.
Whoa.
Some of you guessed it earlier.
Yep.
Dinosaurs, saber-toothed. I think someone earlier said
Saber-toothed cats, precisely, and Smilodon to be specific, which is great. You guys know your Ice Age mammals. So this is Smilodon fatalis, one of the larger of the saber-toothed cats. They're known for their big, big, sharp canines, which folks call fangs. The fancy word for those are their canines. And different than the dog, but kind of like that bobcat, they have fewer teeth and they're all really sharp and meant for eating meat and being predators. Our modern equivalent of what this guy would have been like is this skull in my hands, which is that of a cougar or a mountain lion that still do live in Montana and still do function and work as predators, hunting down bison and elk and deer and the like. So I want to thank you guys for joining me on this tour of prehistoric mammals. We've talked about all sorts of ancient mammals, from ones at the time of the dinosaurs to ones right after dinosaurs to Ice Age mammals. And we've talked a lot about herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores, and all of the clues we can learn from looking at mammal teeth. So I hope you remember that when you go back, when you see another cool mammal. And thank you so much for joining. Let's have some questions if we have time.
All right. Did cats and dinosaurs exist at the same time?
No, cats and dinosaurs did not exist at the same time. What we call and think of as modern cats really didn't show up until about 40 or so million years ago, and dinosaurs went extinct about 66 million years ago. So they missed each other by about 20 million years or so.
What would you say, Amy, your most unique fossil is?
Our most unique fossils? Oh, that could be all sorts. I am biased towards mammals, but I have to recognize the incredible dinosaur egg collection that we have at Museum of the Rockies. Both dinosaur eggs, babies, nestlings, and adults help us as paleontologists learn so much more about the behavior of dinosaurs.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Amy. I challenge you to go out and practice being a scientist when you leave here today. Ask lots of questions, explore outdoors, and talk to people like Amy. Talk to scientists while you're doing it. Thank you again for joining us. You can find this video on our website, and you can also join us again on February 14th or March 27th to talk more about dinosaurs and our paleontology collections. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.